Benjamin Franklin said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." So consider this. The police are going to start systematically using live facial recognition software, which independent analysis says is 81% inaccurate anyway, under a government which I believe is hugely hostile towards human rights. Be it a foreign secretary who doesn't believe in economic and social rights, or a home secretary who once reportedly advocated the death penalty. Not to mention the fact that the Snoopers Charter legislation had to be withdrawn, then reintroduced, then amended again because it violated EU privacy laws. Now, obviously, our safety and security is vital, and facial recognition software to fight crime and improve our national security could be really helpful in that, but only if it was used lawfully. It would need to be coupled with a binding written constitution which permanently guaranteed minimum standards on right to privacy, a right to be forgotten, due process, non-discrimination, free speech, and even a right to life. And right now, we just don't have that.
So I'm really glad that you raised this debate, Femi, and thank you for raising it. It's something I'm very concerned about. So some of you may know I've taken on a few legal cases in my life, and won all of them without exception. There's one case I took on because a particular company named Thomson Reuters WorldCheck had erroneously listed me under a Category Red terrorism designation. They've since issued a statement in court, apologised, retracted it, and paid a settlement, which is why I'm allowed to mention it. Now, the point I make here is, if somebody's listed, like Extinction Rebellion were recently, in error by the police, under a terrorism designation, and then you roll out facial recognition, those photographs that the cameras capture will cross-reference them with suspects, in this case, terrorism suspects. But of course, there's two examples where it's been done in gross error. And imagine the injustices that can occur when you're doing that to every single person in the country. And then I only need to mention one more word, and that is China, for what the potential consequences could be.
Let's just, you're talking about facial recognition cameras. Let's just look at how they work, Majid.
Police say the technology works like this. The faces of anyone not on a watch list appear pixelated. This is what happens when a suspect above is caught in the crowd below. The potential match alerts officers on the ground, and they decide whether to approach the suspect.
You know, my worry is we are already the most spied upon country in the free world. And my concern is that, as you just touched on there, is that if these cameras are installed, it will bring surveillance levels in this country to the levels of that of communist China. We already have 500,000 of these cameras in London alone. And the other part of my argument is, you know, Boris has said he's going to put 20,000 more coppers on the streets. You know, there is much evidence to show that if you have more coppers on the street, the crime rate falls. I don't want the 20,000 coppers holed up in a room somewhere, monitoring cameras all day long, looking for people who might be shoplifting in Tesco's. You know, I know it won't be that. I mean, I'm trying to think. And the bad stories have already emerged. When they were testing these in London, there was a guy who he saw what they were doing, and he pulled his jumper up and his cab down to hide his identity. He was immediately raked over by the police and charged with what was disorderly behaviour. He got fined 90 quid for that, and they're not even up and running yet. And that's the way for me. You know, it gives governments unprecedented power to track our daily lives, and that doesn't marry with a democracy.
And that point is backed up by the polls, because 46% of Brits think that they should have to consent to or be able to opt out of anything like this.
Yeah, we didn't vote for it. We didn't know anything about it. They've just said they're going to do it.
I think it's a great idea. I know, I do, really. I think it's a tremendous idea.
I'm with you.
No, absolutely. Let's hear what the Met say. Nick F. Grave, who's Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police. We are using a tried and tested technology and have taken a considered and transparent approach in order to arrive at this point. We all want to live and work in a city which is safe. The public rightly expect us to use widely available technology to stop criminals. Equally, I have to be sure that we have the right safeguards and transparency in place to ensure that we protect people's privacy and human rights. I believe our careful and considered deployment of live facial recognition strikes that balance. I'm not here to defend something. You're absolutely right to point up the shocking level of 81%. It has to be perfected. I'm not here to defend something that obviously caused you issues and is blatantly wrong. I'm here to defend the principle, which is if you've got people attending a rock concert, a rugby game, a football game, whatever it might be, and do we need to talk about the Ariana Grande concert? If that could prevent that, taking on board what you say, it has to work, it can't be 80% wrong, then I am ready to sign off on it.
I was going to mention that as well. I mean, when you were reading out your intro, I was thinking if I was a parent of one of the children who lost their lives in Manchester, would you have welcomed the use of that sort of surveillance technology? Of course you would. It would have saved, you know, tens of lives. So my question is, are you complaining that this is unethical or inaccurate? If they made the technology completely if they made the technology completely foolproof, would you be in favour of it?
It's a matter of trust. We don't have a written constitution, which means we don't know what the government's going to do with the information that they get from this facial recognition technology.
What do you feel they would, Femi?
We are dealing with the government that they've already put Greenpeace on a terrorist watch list. They deported 100 EU citizens by mistake in 2000. Sorry,
Extinction Rebellion, wasn't it?
No, they sent. Sorry. They sent 100 letters of deportation to EU citizens by mistake in 2016. We've got the Windrush, where we deported our own citizens. We are dealing with a government that cannot be trusted. It is that simple.
Right. Can we
Giving
hear
them
what?
that kind of power?
There's an organisation that monitors this sort of abuse of civil liberties, and let's hear from them. And this is from Silky Carlo, who's the director of Big Brother Watch.
Never before have members of the public been treated like walking ID cards subjected to an ongoing police lineup, that our identities have to be biometrically checked to make sure we're not criminals. That's a complete inversion of the traditional presumption of innocence that is so at the heart of British civil liberties. And that's why I think this is none less than an assault on our rights.
Well, you know, obviously this is debate has
we
to be
live in a
had.
world where children are blown up at pop. I mean, I respect Silky Carlo, but we live in a world where...
But Femi was talking about the issue of trust here. And if I trusted governments to use this properly, I'd say absolutely do it. In America, San Francisco has banned it. Many other states are about to follow suit because of the inaccuracies. And what you don't want is governments and companies being secretive about where and how they're using them. And I fear that will happen. I fear that will
Also, the argument you're using about security, I just wonder why that argument is, of course, always applied. So it's always the thin end of the wedge. We always try and erode civil liberties by arguing that it makes us safer. And I'm just wondering where you draw the line on that kind of conversation. And
we don't traditionally in this country do that. Actually,
No,
we've got a proud tradition of not having to show your papers and all the rest
that wasn't
of it,
my
which
question.
is why I think Femi's
Rachel, that wasn't my question, though. My question was that when people try and make a case for eroding civil liberties, it is usually a security argument they use. And, of course, that can be applied on multiple things.
But you do not buy my argument about a pop concert.
I do think it will make us... So the thing is, there's a trade-off. That's my question to you. The trade-off is that, of course, I could make this country a lot safer by forcing compulsory ID cards. Everyone has to give their fingerprint and DNA, facial recognition. At what point do we say it's too much power for the state to have to keep us safe?
Did anybody see a drama recently called The Capture? And it featured exactly this about these facial recognition cameras. And it showed you the government misusing and abusing it to fit up certain people for certain offences. And I fear that's what can happen.
Anyone who's watched Person of Interest knows that this can be misused. I know you probably might not have watched that show, but the point is, I don't have a problem with the technology in and of itself. It is a simple matter of trust. We don't. If the government put in a legally binding constitution whereby you had minimum standards guaranteed on right to privacy, right to life, and those sorts of things, then that would make me a lot more comfortable with it. But right now, the government in place, not a massive fan. They have absolute power, so there's no input from any other parties. So it would just be it would be a government that is massively hostile.
Femi, the new iPhone 11 has got facial recognition technology. Presumably that's all uploading to a cloud, and who knows who's got access to that data.
It doesn't make it right.
Got to move on, guys. Okay.